Good. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Bulimia Sucks. My name is Kate Hudson Hall, and this is a platform for people to share relatable and uplifting and inspiring conversations based on bulimia and anorexia and other eating disorders. And these are real stories from people who are suffering or have suffered an eating disorder. And episodes will include their personal stories of where they are now and their difficult journeys and their steps taken into their recovery, and also to professionals who work with people with eating disorders. My Bulimia Sucks audiobook is live now on Audible and Amazon and iTunes. And if you would be interested and would like a free copy of this, then please email me at katehudsonhall@gmail.com and I can send you the code to download it for free. And then also our Patreon platform is live. And for those of you who don't know what Patreon is, it's a way for our listeners to support us financially and allow us to continue creating content and helping people. And that's what we want to do, help people with eating disorders. So if you're interested, go and check it out at patreon.com/bulimia sucks. Now, I'm very excited today to welcome our special guest. And her name is Nikki DeBose. And she is a former model who worked for over 15, who has worked and lived in over 15 countries. And she holds a BA in psychology and is working on getting into a dual clinical psychology program in Northern California. She is also a certified eating disorders specialist recovery coach and is also a recovered individual from a 17-year eating disorder and also other issues around that area since 2013. And she has authored and contributed to 4 books on mental health and eating disorders and has spoken on television shows around the world to educate people why the modeling industry needs mental health education, which I'm looking forward to hearing more about and her views on that. So welcome, Nikki. This is great to have you on.
Thank you for having me. I'm really excited to be here today.
Yeah, this is so exciting. So now, Nikki, do you have a funny story for us?
Yeah, I have everything for me is funny. I guess I'm always doing something goofy and silly. It's just my personality. I'm just kind of a awkward person, but that's all right, right?
Absolutely.
So, when I was modeling, I never really felt like I was that perfect model, right? Like all the models kind of like I felt like fit in with each other. But I was never that girl or that woman, right? So I was always a bit awkward still and a bit goofy. And when I was really young, when I was about 16 or maybe 15 or 16, I went to a modeling school, which I'll just tell you, these are mostly scams. But I went, yeah, they really are. I hate to tell you, but I went to one in my hometown and I was always for myself. I was always kind of like off to the side. And I never really talked to any of the other girls, but we had a modeling coach and she was always pushing me, to do my runway walk perfectly. So I was always really nervous because of this. Yeah. And because I was so nervous, my body was always really stiff, right? Yeah. Yeah. And so we had a day at the end of the week where we had to walk in front of, all the other girls. And by the time it was my turn, I was so nervous that I was just completely stiff. And I just felt like everyone else was just so, limber and they could just do the walk perfectly. But I was a nervous wreck. And so when it was my turn, I was so nervous that I fell When I got to the end, I actually fell off because it was pretty narrow.
Yeah.
And so I fell kind of off to the side.
Oh
And
no, when you were 16. Oh my God.
I was 15 or 16 and actually scraped my ankle. And there actually were a few other embarrassing, humiliating things that happened there. And it was just a really awkward thing. I should have never signed up for that modeling school.
I think it's such a difficult age anyway.
Yeah. And I didn't have my mom there with me. It was the other girls had their mothers there with her. They had that support. And so I just felt really humiliated. And I think I quit after that. And I was I'm never going to model ever again. This is the worst thing that could ever do. But I was actually there were some other really horrible things that are not funny. I'm not going to talk about, but if you want to, talk about funny things, I guess that's funny. But at the time, it did not feel funny.
At the time, it wasn't. You were heartbroken, I'm sure. Oh, God.
Yeah. But that's the story of my life, to be honest with you. I can be awkward in any situation, even when I'm not meaning to be awkward or funny. And so the point of that is I've learned how to laugh at myself, right? I've learned how to make fun of myself, how to just turn maybe a serious situation into a funny situation. And it's okay, it's okay to have a light heart.
And I think, that's sort of the strive to be perfect for many people with an eating disorder. And, it's okay not to be perfect.
Yeah, because nobody, right? That actually
absolutely.
And we hear that all the time. That's a cliche thing, right? But it really is true. And it's easy to get stuck in that that tightness of oh my God, I need to be perfect, but there is no such thing as perfection.
Yeah. And that huge pressure that, that we can put on ourselves to be perfect. And there's no need to do that. You don't need to be perfect at everything.
No.
Particularly in your industry, like you're saying, and that is such a real key that I'm sure everybody was striving to be perfect.
Yeah, everyone,
That
strives to be perfect, right? But it's really just this sort of false self, right?
Yeah.
That you're competing for a career, right? To make money and to be accepted, I think, right? Because a lot of people, and I'm going to only speak for myself, when I modeled, it was because I didn't really know myself, right? And so I was creating an identity to be accepted by other people and maybe to be accepted by my family, and more so to be accepted by myself, because I didn't know who I really was. So I thought, wow, if I can be this amazing, famous model, then I will love myself more, right? Because I wasn't really dealing with the real issues underneath. And, there's nothing wrong with having an amazing career. I think it's important. It's important to have passions and to have a great career, but it can't be your whole identity. And you need to, understand who you really are underneath your work and underneath those passions. And if your identity and if your work leads to dangerous obsessions where you're not being healthy, then that's not good, right? We don't want to go into that area. So that's where it led for me. And that's why it became a bad thing for me. So.
And how long were you modeling for?
I modeled from about 15, 16 and then I took a little break, did other things. And then I ended up modeling until I was about 26. And that's when I quit.
So that's a long time.
It's a long time. There was a little bit of time when I took a break that I went to school, and I thought I was pre-med and I wanted to be a doctor then. I wanted to be a dermatologist. But again, I was a super overachiever. I was, I had a hard time with being perfectionist, and I took way too many classes. And I was like, I can't do this. I can't deal with all this, all these classes. I can't be this person, right? I can't deal with this level of, success. And I quit. And that there was a pattern in my life where I was doing that over and over again. And it showed up in my relationships, my work, my school. And that's something that I had to deal with.
So that specific pattern for you would be you if we were to sort of lay it out, so it would be you taking on too much and not being aware of how much you have taken on, and then the pressure piles up, and the perfectionism and the pressure. So it's interesting that you now have identified that, and you can be aware of it, so you can change it.
Right. You have to become conscious.
Yeah.
Right. Of yourself, become self-aware, and identify what are the things in your life that are hindering you from moving forward, and what are the challenges in your life that are keeping you from being your best. And so for me, it was definitely the perfectionism and the overachieving, and that was triggering me and keeping me in my eating disorder habits. And I had to go beneath all that with a therapist. Much later in my life, this happened, right? But identify why I was even doing that in the first place, right?
Yeah.
And those were deeply rooted from my childhood. So I was happy that I went to therapy and dealt with all that. But this was something, yes, that would happen. It was cyclical, right? I would build up, and then these were well intended, right? These were things I was passionate about, but I would take on way too much, and then it was like an explosion, and then I would feel frustrated, depressed, a lot of the self-loathing, which would then trigger eating disorder behaviors and other negative behaviors. And then nothing would happen for a while, which was the depression. And then I would get my gusto back, but then it wasn't in a balanced way, right? I didn't know how to be balanced.
And how did you learn to be balanced?
That took many years. And I think that really started, unfortunately, it started after I stopped modeling. There are sometimes I think, gosh, I wish I could have learned how to do that in my career, because there was a part of me that really did love the creative aspect of my career, and did love modeling. But I learned how to slow down, and I learned balance after I left modeling, and after my mother passed away from addiction. That all happened in the same year. And sometimes we have these big things that happen in our lives that are like red flags, and that cause us to be very interested and cause us to slow down, right?
Yeah.
So for me, that was all of that. And it kind of forced me to look at myself and to see where I was out of balance. And this all took place with a therapist, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Working through that for a long time, for at least a couple of years. And I think that not having my career and being at home, I was married, so having that time at home while my husband worked, and just working through all my workbooks, and becoming completely I want to say abstinent from my eating sort of behaviors, and working through those. Once those were not present, and I was able to really look at myself and understand what was underneath the ED behaviors,
right,
what was driving the ED behaviors, then I could see, wow, oh my gosh, I am so out of whack. And that's okay, but wow, I need a lot of balance in my life, because I have so many triggers, and so many things that cause me to be a workaholic, and that cause me to be like, a little bit obsessive compulsive, and all of these different things. And I need to really work on those, because if I don't, I'm going to, I might have 2 years of being relaxed, but then they can flare up again, so I need to work on these underlying behaviors. So that's what I did. And I focused on those with my therapist and with the coach for at least a few years. And it helped me. I also worked on some past trauma issues that I had, some prior abuse issues from being a child. And that was extremely important because I felt like that was the main driving issue in my life. So everything's interconnected, right? And you kind of have to go where you might not want to go, but it's really important if you want to be free, if you want to be liberated, let's say, from the things that are driving the negative behaviors in your life.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I love that. And we were talking briefly before we started here that we were talking about the modeling world and the models, and you've contributed to statistics research, haven't you, with the amount of people with eating disorders that are models?
Yeah, I have. I've worked since. So that kind of started actually when I was, that started lightly when I was just starting my recovery, only because I started writing about my own experiences. And I was one of the only people that I knew of that was kind of doing that. And that led into volunteer different organizations, media organization. Um, and then I started working in public health. I did some work with Harvard, their public health uh, school, and we did some work with some legislation in California, and I also did some work in Albany, New York, with a child sexual abuse bill, and so that gave me a lot of perspective on things that were not working, and they're still not working, unfortunately, so it's kind of exhausting a little bit to think that, wow, things are still not changed, but that just gives me a lot of hope because I see that in my future work as a clinician many years from now, I can, hopefully maybe provide more, research and more,
So, Nikki, what do you think needs to change? What
so
specifically needs to change if we had a magic wand here with regards to modeling and the issues and all the negative issues around it?
yeah, I will tell you that I think that there needs to be more mental health education for models,
Yeah.
and more resources, right, for them, because presently there's not. There's been a lot of work done in terms of there are some modeling organizations for models, but there's not education, there's not resources for the models and the ages themselves. And that's a hard hill to climb because unfortunately, some agents and some agencies are resistant to that, even though there's such a high percentage of models who present with eating disorders. But I think that, as I kind of go through my training as a clinician and maybe as other people do, and so as you come from that educated standpoint, right, and say, I'm a clinician, you have these credentials, and as other clinicians do, as we become more knowledgeable about this issue, they might be more receptive, right?
Yeah.
Because it doesn't need to be a political thing. Sometimes maybe if they see that it's a political issue, they might be less
the pushback maybe. Yeah.
right. But I think maybe if it's more of a medical or a health oriented issue, then they might be a little bit more receptive. I know the political climate's been crazy, and so I think that might be why they've been a little bit less, a little bit more resistant to that. But I'm hoping that the knowledge that I have and with us other clinicians have, that we can maybe implement more educational resources to these models because they badly need it. Some agents, don't even know what eating disorders are. And this is probably the number one issue that affects models, guys and girls. It's not just girls, but also guys, because guys, as you know, sometimes feel the pressure to bulk up or be more muscular, which could be a sign of maybe body dysmorphia, or other issues. So.
So do you think even in this day and age, there is pressure put on the models to be as slim as possible? Obviously as perfect as possible, but still as slim as possible, even though that is changing. But do you think there still is that pressure?
I would say probably yes, just because, again, there's that lack of educational resources
Yeah.
and there's been a lack of discussion, in the industry in general, right? So even though you're seeing a greater diversity in the industry, we know that body weight and the way someone looks does not have anything to do with their health and how if they have an eating disorder or not, right?
Yeah.
So it would be very unfair of me to say, oh yeah, sure, they're fine. Because how do I know that,
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think that's the difficulty for a lot of people, particularly with bulimia. And
Right.
when they get they are in that right place to address it, to speak to somebody about it. There is often, my clients often say to me, well, when I decided to get help, I spoke to somebody, a family member or a friend, and they didn't believe me because I'm not skinny. And that's a difficulty in itself.
Mhm. Yeah, and I just know from the personal experience of the pressure, and especially with the social media pressure, right, to perform and to have the huge amount of following on Instagram from their agents and that sort of thing. That's a lot of emotional and mental pressure, and that's really where an eating disorder can also come in. So it's the pressure to be successful and the pressure to look a certain way and to be a certain way, and that really has nothing to do with weight, right? So we just really want to be careful, to just not ignore them and say, oh yeah, they're fine. you know there's the body diversity that has nothing to do with any of this, right? It's about taking care of their mental health and their emotional health. And, as because you're a therapist, saying, are you okay? Checking in with them.
Oh,
How are you
absolutely.
feeling today? Right? Are you okay? And I don't think that there's anyone really doing that. I know that in sports, there, a lot of times sports psychologists, right? But is there a model psychologist? I don't really think that there is. So I think that
There you
that's
go. There you are. You could be the first.
well, I don't know what that's going to look like, but it can be something, maybe I offer as a specialty, I guess. I mean,
Yeah.
that's not really out there, but I can offer my services as something, that it will look like as, I've been a model and I understand, but as in the field, there's not a model psychologist. It doesn't exist.
Yeah.
So, and I think it should, because, even in ballet, there aren't, so I guess that would fall under sports psychology, right?
Mm.
But there's not a model psychology. It's very similar to sports psychology, but it's not the same thing, I would say.
No, no.
They're dealing with different issues. And again, I will tell you, it's something that is laughed at. It's very interesting because sports psychology is not. You're not going to go into a meeting with government officials and different professionals and talk about the issues affecting these athletes and have them laugh about it, right? But you will, because I've been there, you will go into a meeting with professionals and talk about the issues affecting models or in the media, for example, go and read an article, and there's a lot of comments where it's laughed at.
Oh,
Why is that? Right?
wow.
I
That's
don't know.
shocking.
It is shocking because we're talking about mental
Yeah.
health.
Whatever somebody does for their profession, if it's the mental health area that needs to be addressed.
well, even with like Simone Biles,
Mm.
the other day, or even with her, when she decided to take a break, which I think is wonderful because
Yeah,
that's her
absolutely. She knew, it's the Olympics, isn't it? We're talking about the
responsibility.
gymnast.
Right.
But yeah, for her to make that decision, and what a huge decision, but underneath unconsciously, she knew that she had to, she needs to walk away at the moment
Mhm.
for
Which
her
I,
own health, mental health.
mhm.
And
But
how fantastic it is, and what an amazing role model she is for
Mhm.
people. Mm.
Yeah, and even then, a lot of people were questioning that and kind of
Yes.
like, you know, laughing about that, which I think is a shame. It just shows how much more of education
Yeah.
uh, that we have to do, even though we've done a lot in the past
There's
10
still a
years.
long way to go. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. So with regards to your eating disorders, what, when you got to that point of thinking, okay, I really need to make some sort of positive change, what sort of got you to that point, that turning point to start to maybe step onto your recovery path?
Um, at the point where I realized I wanted to recover, um, well, it was really unfortunately when my mom passed away. And I think, there's a saying, that sometimes when people close to us pass away, it becomes our turning point, right?
Yeah.
And for me, that was true. And I took that time to really analyze myself and understand myself. It could have gone the opposite way,
Mm.
and sometimes it does. But for
Yes.
me, I didn't want it to go that way. I had already been going to AA meetings with my mom, 12-step groups with my mother, and I was using that time also to reflect and I was listening to the principles in those groups and using. I was like, hey, I need these principles also, because the 12-step principles are pretty universal, and they can be applied to
Yeah.
eating disorders, to, whatever you're going through.
Yeah.
And I, they were really sinking in with me. And I was thinking, I don't, really think that I identify anymore with the modeling thing. And I feel like I don't want to live this life anymore. I'm feeling like this is not a part of my intuitive self anymore, right?
Mm.
And I feel like I'm needing a change. And the life that I have been living, which is a really fast life, a party lifestyle, it doesn't identify with me anymore. And I want to be on a life that means something for my heart and my soul. And I could feel it, but it was still buried,
But
with
it
all
was there. It was the door was beginning to open.
right. It was still buried with all the chatter of Ed and the
Yeah.
addictive issues and all that stuff. So I knew I wanted that, and there was all the grief there. But I, I needed to shut out. I just needed to like stop working so that I could be quiet for a while and be mindful and find out what that new life was for me. And sometimes we need to make big changes in our life. And sometimes they're small changes. It doesn't have to be like this whole dramatic change, but sometimes it does. Sometimes we have to cut out people, places in our life
Yeah.
if we want to get recovered or have recovery. Um, and sometimes it's just little tiny changes, right? But for me, in my life, it was making a big drastic change. And I lost a lot of friends. I lost, a lot of opportunities. I lost a lot of money. But it was okay because I then gained, right, full recovery. Um, and I gained a new life that was in line with my heart and my soul and what I felt like was really me, right? It wasn't this false self that I had put on just to people please and just to kind of gain attention and be a model and, that sort of thing. It was really in line with what I felt
From your
like
heart, yeah.
was who I really was for the first time in my life.
Yeah. So specifically, what were your reasons for recovering?
Well, my reasons for recovering, like I said, my mother,
Yeah.
and what helped me to recover is that's more of what you're asking me, right?
Yes.
Um, I, of course, recovery doesn't happen in a vacuum. I had a sponsor, and I had a therapist, and I had a coach, and these were I would say, the core pieces, the core people who really helped me to get myself back together. Um, and that took a while.
Mm.
It took a long time because I was very disconnected from myself. And, the first thing I had to do was really um, recover from the eating disorder itself.
Right.
And that took a while, right? Because I had an eating disorder for many years. But my coach, my therapist, my house, like I said, I had like or three different people who all had very different roles, helped me. And then eventually I had a nutritionist who helped me. And I was also seeing a doctor, like an MD. Um, so it sounds like a lot, but it is a lot, and that's okay.
And I think,
Because,
I think it's the more support that you can have, the more
right. I mean,
beneficial it's going to be.
yeah, I mean, I was older, so, a little bit older. And, the earlier you can catch an eating disorder, the better. But you have to remember, I didn't have my support really. So, that's another layer to where, they say when you're younger and if you have that family support, that's great because then you can kind of get a hold of it earlier. But when you're a little bit older and you may not have like, you're not living with your family or anything and you're just kind of dealing with it as a grown woman, then you really need a full,
The external,
treatment,
yeah. Mm.
and it's really up to you, to decide, are you going to be this thing or not? And so I had to dig my heels in and I had to decide myself, I'm going to beat this eating disorder. The spiritual component for me was extremely important. I grew up religious, Christian. So the interesting thing about that for me was that I had to understand that it wasn't about being religious, but it was about having a spiritual foundation in my life. Um, and that meant all that really means is just knowing that I can't do it on my own, right? And just having a higher power. So whatever that is,
Mm.
just
Mm.
being powerless and giving up that power to your higher power and letting that power take control over your life.
Yeah, absolutely. Whatever that higher power is for you.
Whatever. It can be a tree, it can be,
Mm.
the sun and the moon or God, it can be anything.
Yeah.
And so I had to stop controlling every little thing in my life. And that was really hard, right? Because I'm a perfectionistic control freak, and I want to control everything, but I can't. So I had to give that up and let my higher power control that for me. And that was probably the moment when I, had to let go. And so if my weight went up, right, which is
Yeah.
really hard in recovery, then it went up,
Yeah.
and that's okay.
Yeah.
And if it went down, it went down. And if it was like over here or whatever, you know what I mean? There's a million things that happen in recovery. So
Yeah.
I just had to learn to accept that and let go and work through those things with my therapy team.
And have that, work through it with your support team. Yeah. Yeah. So Nikki, so what advice would you give somebody with an eating disorder if they had, if you had somebody sitting in front of you right now?
Well,
In a nutshell.
yeah,
Difficult.
difficult, right? When we're going through an eating disorder, it might feel like we're never going to get through it. And I know that feeling because I was there for 17 years of my life, which is almost half of my life. I'm 36, so I struggled for 17 years. And I would tell you that you can totally recover. And I can say that because I have totally recovered. Now, recovery means, I still manage my recovery, right? But I don't wake up and I don't think about my eating disorder, right? I'm liberated. I can wake up and choose whatever I want to eat, right? I don't live in
and not living and thinking about food all the time, which is
right,
what you do, isn't it?
right,
You're
yeah. So
depriving
you can,
yourself of the food or
yeah. So you can get to that place, and I thought I would recover, but I'm here, and not only am I here, but I went back. I got my degree, and I'm got accepted into a doctoral program for psychology so that I can help other people get free. I mean, to me, that's amazing because trust me, when you're in the hell of ed, you cannot think of anything other than eating disorder.
Yeah.
So it really all, starts with wanting to become recovered. Once you realize that you have an eating disorder, right? It's a process. Then you can reach out for help, right? The sooner that you get help, the better. But you're never too far gone to get help. You're never too young. You're never
Absolutely.
too old to get
And I
help.
think that's a really important point, that you're
Yeah.
never too buried
No.
to begin to just reach out.
No. You're never too far gone. You're not too old. You're not too broken. There's nothing wrong with you. It just takes a step up and a step of faith to say, I want to get help. I want to get better. And then, right, we can work on making those changes so that you can become liberated from your eating disorder behaviors. There is a voice of Ed, right? We call him Ed. He's like a bad boyfriend or a bad girlfriend, right? And we work on changing those bad voices into positive voices known as your intuitive therapist or your IT voice. And that's really just the voice, the good voice, the healthy voices that you've had within yourself all along. It's just, we want to get you across that bridge into listening to your intuition.
Yeah, it's actually, listening out for that healthy voice. And first of all is being aware that it is actually in there and listening out for it. And you will gradually start to hear more and more of it.
Yeah.
That healthy voice.
Yeah. You just need someone, or, you need maybe a few people to help you, get there. But all you got to do really is just say, hey, I need help. That's it.
Yeah. Gosh, Nikki. So like you said, if we can do it, I had bulimia and anorexia for 15 years. And when I think back, I just could not see any way out. And there wasn't the huge medical sort of support back then, because it was actually in the 1800s, I believe. But there wasn't. But even so, it's, if you and I can find our way through the complete confusion that we were thinking back then other people can do that with their support team.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah. Wow. Well, thank you so much, Nikki. Is there anything else that you would like to add? Anything else that the listeners may want to hear? from all of your experience?
Well, if they'd like to find out more about my recovery coaching, they can go to my website. It's liveedfree.com.
Yeah, so we'll put all the links below so people can come find you. So that's the best place for them to find you.
Yes.
Okay. Okay, that's excellent. Well, you've been such an inspiration for us all.
Thank you for me. I have enjoyed talking with you. You're so insightful. And thank you for sharing about your own recovery as well.
Oh, yes. It's good for people to hear that you can recover.
Yes.
100%. And here we are talking about it. So everybody listen up. You can do it.
Yes, you can.
Yeah.
So,
wow. So thank you so much, Nikki.
thank you.
It's amazing to have you on.
Thank you. I really appreciate you. Honestly, I do so much appreciate you asking me to come on and share. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you to everybody to listening today. And come and join us again on the next episode of Bulimia Sucks. And make sure you subscribe to the podcast on Apple iTunes so you never miss an episode. Plus, as I mentioned earlier, you can check out my book, which is on Amazon, to learn many different techniques to help you to begin to break through those difficult negative patterns that maybe you've got into. And I'd love to hear what you think. So please leave a review. And also make sure you come and join us on our Facebook group so it's good to chat with other like-minded people, and we can all chat together about our different experiences and help each other. So I look forward to seeing you there and in the next episode.